Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we are plunging straight on with our 12 rules for I'rab. And the eighth rule, which Ibn Hisham, rahimahullah, has presented, concerns the rasm. And then maybe with this munasaba that Imam al-Suyuti has mentioned some things related to the rasm thereafter, after these rules. So those are things that we will cover, including this example of inna hadhani lasahiran in that reading, which is discussed a bit more later in the chapter. Bismillah.
الأمر الثامن أن يراعى الرسم، ومن ثم خطئ من قال في سلسبيل إنها جملة أمرية، أي سل طريقا موصلة إليها، لأنها لو كانت كذلك لكتبت مفصولة. ومن قال في قوله إن هذان لساحران، إنها إن واسمها، أي إن القصة، وذان مبتدأ خبره لساحران، والجملة خبر إن، وهو باطل برسم أن منفصلة، وهذان متصلة.
Okay, you can reconstruct that from the written text here in Arabic. But yeah, salsabila, it's a bit awkward also from the waqf perspective. عينا فيها تسمى, and then salsabila as a separate, سل الله سبيلا إلى هذه العين, something like that. Now, what could happen is that you could say the name of it is salsabila. The name of it is seek a path, maybe. But then you still have to contend with the fact that it is one word. So your argument then, or your idea, is that the name of it is constructed from the two words salsabila, and then it has become one word, right? I mean, in English, we sometimes have names that are constructed from two words, like shoemaker, or in German, Schumacher, right? So you just have the two parts. It could be like feel good, Johnny feel good. You can have originally a few words which then become one word, murakkab. Regarding this, we will see. This is هذا باطل. So some understood it as إنها ذان لساحران, and we'll see the other suggestions around the ayah a bit later, inshallah.
ومن قال في قوله تعالى ولا الذين يموتون وهم كفار، إن اللام للابتداء، والذين مبتدأ، والجملة بعده خبره، هو باطل، فإن الرسم ولا. ومن قال في قوله أيهم أشد، إن هم أشد مبتدأ وخبر، وأي مقطوعة على الإضافة، وهو باطل برسم أيهم متصلة. ومن قال في قوله تعالى وإذا كالوهم أو وزنوهم يخسرون، إنهم ضمير رفع مؤكد للواو، وهو باطل برسم الواو فيهما بلا ألف بعدها، والصواب أنه مفعول. الأمر التاسع أن يتأمل عند ورود المشتبهات، ومن ثم خطئ من قال في قوله تعالى أحصى لما لبثوا أمدا، إنه فعل تفضيل والمنصوب تمييز، هو باطل، فإن الأمد ليس محصيا بل محصى، وشرط التمييز فإن الأمد ليس محصيا بل محصي، الله أعلم. وشرط التمييز المنصوب بعد أفعل كونه فاعلا في المعنى، فالصواب إنه فعل، فإن الأمد ليس محصيا بل محصي، وشرط التمييز المنصوب بعد أفعل كونه فاعلا في المعنى، فالصواب إنه فعل وأمدا مفعول، مثل وأحصى كل شيء عددا.
Okay. Did you just say Allahu A'lam in the middle of that? Allah bless him and give him all khair in his life. Allah barik. Oh, the stress you can feel. Anyway, but to take care at junctures of potential confusion, let's try to reconstruct this. Criticism was directed at those who claim that in لنعلم أيهم أحصى لما لبثوا أمدا, right? So in this one, أحصى can be looked at as if it's أفعل تفضيل. That would be the kind of expectation, and the translations might well say so. ثم بعثناهم لنعلم أي الحزبين أحصى لما لبثوا أمدا. Right. Don't worry, I memorized Surah Al-Kahf. Just like sometimes when you get to the end of an ayah, you have to remember what's the start of it. Right, so is an relative noun followed by its accusative of distinction, tamyiz, amada. However, this is erroneous, as the amad is that which is counted, not that which counts. But in this af'al form, in this situation, would have to be the fa'il. Therefore, ahsa must be a verb. Ayyuhum ahsa, and amadan is his object, and he has enumerated, or like in this ayah, is enumerated all things in number. So then the translation of the ayah on that basis would have to be, which of them counted the period of which they stayed, something like this, right? We'll take a look at this. We'll take a look at this. So many random things here. Sorry. Set of translations. Okay, so 1812. This is a tool that Hamza Hassan made, based on the translations from islamoawaken.com. But he's reordered it chronologically, and it's just a bit easier to use as well. Right, so 1812 were more exact, could best reckon, could best calculate, best able, best, better reckoning, best at, better, best, right? You see what's happening here. Rashad Khalifa, bizarrely, although he is, as batil as can be, has got the best translation so far in terms of, if we accept the point here made by Ibn Hisham. Better comprehension, best calculate, had the correct account, not quite clear which way he's going here. Most rightly, best at, better, best, more accurately, better, is more counting, weird, best enumerate, best tell, made better use of the time, Ajib, was most precise, better calculate. Now the thing is, what I'm pointing out to you here is, I'm not saying ibtida'an that all these translators are wrong, but the question is, were they assured in their in what they're doing? هل تأملوا, did they see the problem with ahsa being af'al tafdil, and then did they decide, well, it's not really a problem for me? Maybe in some of the tafasir a good argument is made, but you have to be, as you say, ala bayyinatin min amrik, as a translator, was best at, God knows what's happening there, could account for, it's not best. So a few of them don't have this best. Of course, Said Qutb was not a Quran translator. This is Adil Salahi's translation. Abdul Halim, better able, better reckoned, better calculated. Okay, let's see. Anyone else that you're really interested in? Let's see, down to the bottom. We'll make a better estimation, at best calculated. Okay, so it would be another thing to say, let's go into the tafasir and see a bit more about the arguments made. But according to this statement here, it is incorrect to say ahsa amadan, right? Because they're not an amad themselves. They're supposed to be the fa'il of ahsa, whereas you say, if they were to say ahsa amadan, it implies that they are the object. The amad is that which is counted, not that which counts. But the condition of the accusative is after the relative af'al form is that be semantically the fa'il. Right. 10th, not to go against established norms or their apparent meaning without justification. There's an example coming to my mind. I'm just trying to think best where to mention it. Maybe here. Makki ibn Abi Talib al-Qaisi was criticized regarding لا تبطلوا صدقاتكم بالمن والأذى.
الأمر العاشر ألا يخرج على خلاف الأصل أو خلاف الظاهر لغير مقتضٍ، ومن ثم خطئ مكي في قوله تعالى لا تبطلوا صدقاتكم بالمن والأذى كالذي ينفق ماله، إن الكاف نعت لمصدر أي إبطالا كإبطال الذي، والوجه كونه حالا من الواو أي لا تبطلوا صدقاتكم مشبهين الذي، فهذا لا حذف فيه. الأمر الحادي عشر.
So it seems to me Makki's takhrij of it is fine. I don't personally I see it as fine, but the idea here is wherever you posit something like hadf and taqdeer, right? You see they call it irtikab, right? Like you've committed something, almost like a kind of violence. This is a kind of hyperbolic way of speaking, but it's almost like how much do you have to posit? Can you take the ayah on its zahir? If you can take the ayah on its zahir, this is the better thing to do. As soon as you say something is implied, something is hidden, etc., etc., you have taken some steps of made some claims about the ayah, and the less that you can do, the better. That's the general practice in i'rab, right? So that's exactly what he said. This is better as there is no ellipsis involved.
أن يبحث عن الأصلي والزائد، نحو إلا أن يعفون أو يعفو الذي بيده عقدة النكاح، فإنه قد يتوهم أن الواو في قوله يعفون ضمير الجمع فيشكل إثبات النون، وليس كذلك، بل هي فيه لام الكلمة فهي أصلية، والنون ضمير النسوة، والفعل معها مبني ووزنه يفعلن، بخلاف وأن تعفو أقرب فالواو فيه ضمير الجمع وليست من أصل الكلمة. الأمر الحادي عشر.
Funnily enough, this is even, I think, one that has been brought up by some like critics of the Quran, some missionaries. I don't know if it was, what's his name? Anis Shorosh or something. And they said, look, there's grammatical errors in the Quran. Now, aslan, the idea of grammatical errors of the Quran is a very tricky, a problematic one. You can see in the discussion I had with Marijn van Putten about Muslims and non-Muslims studying the Quran. We discussed right at the end, why the category of grammatical errors in the Quran is actually incoherent, and that's his perspective as a linguist. But part of the reason for that is that grammar rules themselves are derived from the Quran. So how can you impose them on the Quran? But here is something where they said إلا يعفون, or after an it should be an يعفو, right? So this person has not heard of nun and niswa, does not know how to conjugate the verb for the feminine plural, because they never probably did that in their life. So-called Arabic speakers, they don't conjugate in this way. It is, some things you never have to use. If you're a learner of Arabic and you go to the Arabic world, you don't have to use the dual very much. Generally, don't have to do rafa' of anything, right? Because everything is, muhandisin, and everything is hum biyaf'alu. There's no yaf'aluna. The noon is gone anyway. These things happen, so then people slip up. They don't notice what they're looking at. Illa ya'funa, perfectly clear Arabic if you know anything about the conjugation of verb for the feminine plural. If not, then you look at it and you say, it shouldn't be illa ya'fu, right? And then it's kind of like the example I told you before about someone who was translating the reading ala yasjudu lillah, and when they saw ala yasjudu, they did not notice that there would have to be a noon here if it is ala for like tawbih, why don't they, or they should prostrate to Allah? That would be ala yasjuduna lillah. Anyway, So obviously, this is not an error, as some simpletons suggested.
أن يجتنب إطلاق لفظ الزائد في كتاب الله تعالى، فإن الزائد قد يفهم منه أنه لا معنى له، وكتاب الله منزه عن ذلك، ولذا فر بعضهم إلى التعبير بدله بالتأكيد والصلة والمقحم. وقال ابن الخشاب: اختلف في جواز إطلاق لفظ الزائد في القرآن، فالأكثرون على جوازه نظرا إلى أنه نزل بلسان القوم ومتعارفهم، ولأن الزيادة بإزاء الحذف، هذا للاختصار والتخفيف، وهذا للتوكيد والتوطئة. ومنهم من أبى ذلك وقال: هذه الألفاظ المحمولة على الزيادة جاءت لفوائد ومعان تخصها، فلا أفضي عليها بالزيادة. قال: والتحقيق أنه أريد بالزيادة إثبات معنى لا حاجة إليه فباطل. قال: والتحقيق أنه إن أريد بالزيادة إثبات معنى لا حاجة إليه فباطل، لأنه عبث، فتعين أن إلينا به حاجة، لكن الحاجة إلى الأشياء قد تختلف بحسب المقاصد، فليست الحاجة إلى اللفظ الذي عده هؤلاء زيادة كالحاجة إلى اللفظ المزيد عليه. انتهى.
Okay, so this is an issue that we mentioned earlier, and people were asking me also about the word OTOs, and I said I use that as the term for ziyada, and we said, you know, kullu za'ida lahu fa'ida in some way, right? But there is a point to describing something as za'ida from a grammatical perspective. A lot of times it can be for ta'keed, it may be for something else, but to always call it ta'keed would be problematic because it doesn't describe every type of ziyada. So they're just kind of saying it is not here having a grammatical function. Actually, that's not quite accurate what I just said, because it might still have a grammatical function, but the point is if you removed it and even removed its grammatical function, it would not change the meaning that is intended. So if you use a min, for example, ما جاءني أحد ما جاءني من أحد, right? Min here is زائدة للتأكيد because it's equivalent to the meaning of ما جاءني أحد, right? So the min has a grammatical effect, but it's like not intended in its own right. So min أحد, one would often say about أحد here that it is مجرور لفظا مرفوع محلا or مرفوع تقديرا, something like that, because conceptually in the sentence, syntactically, it is the fa'il. ما جاءني أحد ما جاءني من أحد. We shouldn't think and conceive of the أحد in here as majroor essentially. It is majroor only due to the fact that the min has entered upon it, and this min is زائدة للتأكيد, right? And clearly here for تأكيد, أكيد, right? Because you were saying nobody came to me, ما جاءني أحد. Nobody at all came to me. ما جاءني من أحد is أوكد or آكد من الأول. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. And generally there was a discussion on basically the adab of talking about the idea of ziyada in Quranic language. So that is from Ibn al-Khashab, and then al-Suyuti has a further comment on it.
وأقول بل الحاجة إليه كالحاجة إليه سواء بالنظر إلى مقتضى الفصاحة والبلاغة، وأنه لو ترك كان الكلام دونه مع إفادته أصل المعنى المقصود أبتر خاليا عن الرونق البليغي، لا شبهة في ذلك. ومثل هذا يستشهد عليه بالإسناد البياني الذي خالط كلام الفصحاء وعرف مواقع استعمالهم وذاق حلاوة ألفاظهم. وأما النحوي الجافي فعن ذلك بمنقطع الثرى.
Nice. Okay, so it just depends the angle that you're looking at. If your job is you're a syntactician, mu'arib, you know, you don't have to be called nahwi jaf, right? The point is that you are analyzing from that perspective, then you'd have certain things to say. If you're in your poetic mode, if you're feeling spiritual, or you're looking from a balagha point of view, more to the point, then you would have other things to say about it. And then nothing is zaida from that perspective. Everything is relevant and indispensable. Now, the example I did, because I share these examples of disastrous interpretations with you, maybe this one could have fit in earlier, but I will stick it in now before we move into the next section. So, somebody made a video about وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ. So this is all in the sequence of things which occur on the Day of Judgment, and as you'd find in any of the tafsirs, al-ishar is a plural of ushara, which is, as you can see from the word ashar, related to 10, because 10 months pregnant camel, right? A 10 months pregnant camel is on the verge of giving birth, requires attention and care, and is going to bring a lot of khair and barakah in giving birth. So it's the kind of day when one would turn away from all such things that would normally require attention and deserve pay back your attention as well. So al-ishar as a word, someone tried to suggest that maybe al-ishar is an alternative masdar in the meaning of mu'ashara, because in form 3, like mujahada and jihad, muqatala and qital, just violent stuff. Let's think about something nice. There are all sorts, right? I'm just trying to think of something that we use munaqasha and niqash, right, which can be more violent than the preceding ones. And oftentimes they say mujahada, we'll use it more for the internal states and the jihad al-nafs, and jihad we would usually use it for the external enemy. But this is not lazim, but sometimes one is more settled in a certain way. So mu'ashara, and theoretically there would be a masdar ishar, theoretically. Now, as for whether that exists fi kalam al-Arab, this goes back to sama'. This goes back to saying, okay, did they use that word? It's not necessarily the case just because you learned a rule that mufa'ala and fi'al are equivalents, that every such word has a corresponding fi'al if it has mufa'ala, or vice versa, right? But this person first posited this, then said, إِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ. That is to say, what does ishar mean then? Mu'ashara is like living together, relations, yeah. وَعَاشِرُوهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ. What does it even mean? It's not clear. But let's suppose that it was clear just for a second. فَرْضًا وَجَدَلًا. What's the main problem with this? Can anyone tell me what is the main problem with this person's theory? وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ. What's the problem with this? You have to be quick because we're recording. Yeah. What's the main problem with the thesis, the idea, the i'rab, if you like, the analysis of the word ishar? Opposite. I don't know what you mean by opposite. وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ. What's the main problem with this? يَا مُعْرِبُونَ. Because there is an i'rab problem. I'm not sure it was something that, I don't know how it fits in within the rules that we mentioned, but maybe more so with some of the rules in the next chapter to do with tadhkir and ta'neef. I'm giving you the big clue. وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ. Why can it not just be in the meaning of إِذَا الْمُعَاشَرَةُ إِذَا الْمُعَاشَرَةُ عُطِّلَتْ, which is strange in meaning anyway? Nobody? That's worrying. That's worrying. You're all okay with this? Gender doesn't match. Thank you, Ismail. Yes. It doesn't match, right? It doesn't work. You can't just stick a feminine verb after al-ishar. If it's al-ishar, ishar is masculine, mu'ashara is feminine, right? Even if they have the same meaning or equivalent, you can't just replace one with the other. إذا العشار عطلت. unless you were to do some really strained ta'wil here, which he didn't, by the way, when I challenged him on this. He did another ta'wil altogether, which I'll tell you in a second. What you could just about maybe posit is الإعشار هنا بمعنى المعاشرة فأنثت أو أنثى على هذا الأساس. But that's very, that's not really. That's like if you were forced, like there was no other takhrij, you would maybe reach in the very, very back pocket, back of the cupboard, kind of, and this qira'ah, we're trying to do, a shadh qira'ah or something like that. You just can't, no, he didn't posit that. What did he posit? He said, masters don't have gender. Masters don't have gender. So I was like, what? Now we've got non-binary master. What's going on here? We have masadir. Masadir are masculine or feminine. Like, we read the same Quran, right? We must have read the same Arabic books. Anything, any page of Arabic, the one we're looking at just now, we'll see the masadir, and we'll see how the genders will match. That's, of course, right? And fi'al is, by its form, is a masculine form, and mufa'ala, by its form, with the tam marbuta, is a feminine form. Qawlan wahidan. Because the Muslims don't have gender. I said, where did you get that from? He said, pick up any nahu book. Look in any nahu book, you'll find. I said, never mind me looking at any nahu book, right? Don't, first of all, talk to me like I never looked at a nahu book, regardless if you know me or don't know me. You just tell me one nahu book that says it. Maybe tell me the page. Khalas, al-bayyinatu ala al-mudda'i. Okay, then you say, oh, you're the mudda'i, that's wrong. I'm saying it's wrong because of, asasiyat, abjadiyat of Arabic language. This is a person who's trying to, reinterpret the Quran and this and then, the video is still up to this day, right? I think. So I said, what do you mean masters don't have gender? He didn't back that up. Later on, some other people shared something with me which they thought backs up this, right? And it's a bit complicated. I won't go into the whole thing right now. But the statement that you find sometimes from the ulama is المصدر لا يؤنث ولا يذكر ولا يؤنث. المصدر لا يذكر ولا يؤنث. Now that's one proposition which I'll explain in a moment. But that's different from just saying المصدر يذكر ويؤنث على الهواء or على الهوى, right? So it's based on على كيفك. You just, if you feel like make it feminine, you make it feminine. If you feel like make it masculine, make it masculine. That is not what the ulama were saying, nor does it match what we read in the entirety of the Quran. Al-masdar la yu'annath wa la yudhakkar, right? What this person is basically claiming, al-masdar yudhakkar wa yu'annath kama tasha, bil-ikhtiyar, anta fi khiyar, right? What does it mean, mu'annath lafzi? Ishar? No. Jihad? Do you say hiya jihadun? No. You say huwa jihad. Wa hiya mujahada. So the form fi'al is masculine, right? Unless it is jam'u taksir of ushara. Ushara, first of all, is feminine, and then jam'u taksir of it is feminine. That's why it's إذا العشار عطلت, right? Why did none of the mufassirin ever before think that al-ishar might be a masdar, meaning mu'ashara? Why not? Right? Before thinking that you're a genius that came up with a whole new idea, go through the books of tafsir. If you find that nobody mentioned that possibility, which seems quite zahir to you, just ask yourself 100 times, please, what am I missing? What is the problem with this that I'm missing? Here, the problem screams out at you, it is a ta' uttilat. In that person's video, he did not touch on the ishkal of the ta'. It means he didn't think about it. And this is the biggest ishkal. You didn't even notice the problem of the ta' before putting this thing out there. And this theory, God knows how many thousands of times it's been viewed. Then when asked about it, you come with this weak sauce of a response, insulting response, condescending response. And first of all, to be condescending, please become someone who is worthy of being condescending. Before talking like, go and open any Nahu book and you'll find it. You know, I could open Nahu books all day and all week and all year, and I will not find it. Not because of any taqsir in me, right? If you claim that it's in there, show me. the ibara from one book, and then we'll talk about that ibara and figure out what's going on. When they say al-masdar la yu'annath wa la yudhakkar, what I assume they have to be meaning is more, in fact, the place where this was discussed is inna rahmatallahi qareebun min al-muhsinin. Maybe it will come in our translation here. Inna rahmatallahi qareebun min al-muhsinin. So they say, why is qareebun not feminine? Inna rahmatallahi qareebatun min al-muhsinin. There are different explanations, and his video is in English, Yusuf. Right, so why is it not qareebatun min al-muhsinin? There are different takhrijat for, or takharij of that, right? And one of them is to say, qareeb here is not what you think qareeb is. Qareeb here is a masdar. And the masdar, la yudhakkar wa la yu'annath, that is to say, you don't change the masdar to match the gender of something else. It's the other way around. It's not that the sifa is not supposed to match the masdar, or the fi'l is not supposed to match the masdar. The point is, the masdar is not changed to match the gender of something else. هذا هو المعنى. Because if you say, for example, Yusuf, because the last person who commented, Yusufu rahmatun limadinatihi, right? Yusuf is a mercy to his city. Or if وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ, one of the ways to read this, we sent you being, as a mercy. So we say Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam rahmatun. We don't say, oh no, Rasulullah, Rasul is masculine, so we say Rasulullah rahmun. Rahm is a lugha of rahim, by the way, so you end up in a, fi sittina dahiya, right? So we want to say here, we have to say Rasulullah rahmatun lil alamin. فالمصدر لا يذكر في هذه الحالة. And in the opposite situation, لا يؤنث. Right? If it is masculine, it's masculine. If it is feminine, it's feminine. Right? So trying to apply this in the masdars don't have gender. Therefore, we can just change it by will, then no. What does happen sometimes is that something which is mu'annath can be sort of stripped of its ta'neef, because it's seen as ta'neef majazi or something like this. So here you can say وَقَالَ نِسْوَةٌ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ. Right? The asl, وَقَالَتْ نِسْوَةٌ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ. And then you can see the discussions, why is it وَقَالَ نِسْوَةٌ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ هَذَا يَحْدُث وَالْعَكْسُ لَا يَحْدُث. You don't just stick a ta'neef onto something. فَخُذْ هَذِي الْقَوَاعِدِ. Every our busyness in this field has to be based on the rules that exist. Enough of the huffing and puffing about it, right? I'm doing that, but if you ask me, if you challenge me, I will say, okay, hayya, let's go together to the masadir and let's see. And if I'm wrong, inshallah, I will admit it, right? And by the way, these things, whenever I get into these, whenever I decide to comment on these things, first of all, I always regret it, except that it gives me good fodder to share with my students. And also to tell people about how disastrous it is to try to tell people that they're wrong on the internet. Even if you know what you're talking about, and people should know that you know what you're talking about. But I tend to regret it. But also, one of the first things I do, I always send what that person is saying to one or two colleagues. And I say to them, am I missing something? Is it me? Because maybe I just missed the point. But then when they confirm that, yeah, this person is on something, then I say what I can. Okay, let's continue. Points of note. This is important.
تنبيهات. التنبيه الأول: قد يتجاذب المعنى والإعراب الشيء الواحد بأن يوجد في الكلام أن المعنى يدعو إلى أمر والإعراب يمنع منه والمتمسك به صحة المعنى ويؤول لصحة الإعراب، وذلك كقوله تعالى: إنه على رجعه لقادر يوم تبلى السرائر. فالظرف الذي هو يوم يقتضي المعنى أنه يتعلق بالمصدر وهو رجع، أي أنه على رجعه في ذلك اليوم لقادر. لكن الإعراب يمنع لعدم جواز الفصل بين المصدر ومعموله، فيجعل العامل فيه فعلا مقدرا دل عليه المصدر. وكذا أكبر من مقتكم أنفسكم إذ تدعون، فالمعنى يقتضي تعلق إذ بالمقت، والإعراب يمنعه للفصل المذكور فيقدر له فعل يدل عليه. التنبيه الثاني: قد يقع في كلامهم هذا تفسير معنى وهذا تفسير إعراب، والفرق بينهما أن تفسير الإعراب لا بد فيه من ملاحظة الصناعة النحوية، وتفسير المعنى لا تضره مخالفة ذلك.
Okay, so this is the deep stuff where there is this kind of tension between the two sina'as. Meaning takes precedence, but it is still, sometimes a very complicated takhrij has to be given in order for the meaning to be retained. Ultimately, sometimes, because also there's this question: isn't the Quran clear? I don't want to get into all that just now. Of course, the Quran describes itself as clear in certain ways. If mubin means clear, otherwise mubin can mean clarifying, not necessarily clear. But I accept the Quran is clear in certain respects and easy in certain respects. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ, and not necessarily lit-tafsir, right? But there is a certain level on which the Quran communicates with people who will understand it just by a reasonable grasp of the language. But then we get into technicalities and we look more closely, and sometimes maybe the mufassirin could be seen as overanalyzing something, hair splitting. I wouldn't necessarily say that. I would just say the sana'a of tafsir itself, the sana'a of nahu, involves making sure, really probing to get to the bottom of understanding something. So sometimes the general meaning is clear enough, but then there is just a question of, okay, but how does that work? Go back to our example of laysa kamithlihi shay. We all understand Allah is negating that He has a mithl, right? But then someone comes along, maybe in order to create a problem, or just curious, but doesn't saying that laysa kamithlihi shay mean that He has a mithl and no one's like that mithl? It's like, oh, I hadn't really thought of that. Okay, but no, that's not right. But now you have to explain why it's not right. Okay, so that's where you get into the deep magic. Can I call it magic? Inna fil bayani lisihra. Take it from that. My children were watching Narnia recently. That's why the deep magic.
التنبيه الثالث: قال أبو عبيد في فضائل القرآن: حدثنا أبو معاوية عن هشام بن عروة عن أبيه قال: سألت عائشة عن لحن القرآن في قوله تعالى: إن هذان لساحران، وعن قوله تعالى: والمقيمين الصلاة والمؤتون الزكاة، وعن قوله تعالى: إن الذين آمنوا والذين هادوا والصابئون. فقالت: يا ابن أخي هذا عمل الكتاب، أخطأوا في الكتاب، هذا إسناد صحيح على شرط الشيخين.
Okay, so this opens up a big hornet's nest, if you like. But Suyuti, of course, is trying to address these concerns, these narrations. Now, lahan, as we said before, lahan could mean different things. But here in the context, it seems that it's meaning error, and then in response, أخطأوا fil kitab. But this is open to different ways of taking what is exactly intended by lahan, and in some of the different narrations, right? So we'll see that, inshallah. So he asked about inna hadani. Now, in the script of the Mus'haf, it wouldn't necessarily show up as being mushaddad, that it should be inna hadani. If you see this presentation of the rasm, do you know how to spell rasm in English? I spell it RSM, because I like just take off the vowels. Because the rasm refers to the skeletal, the consonantal skeleton of the script, right? So in hadani, you see that here there's no explicit alif in hadani. La sahirani also, no explicit alif. And it could be read as in hadani la sahiran, as we have in the reading of Hafs, which takes away that ishkal. If you see it as in, مخففة. That is to say, إنه هذان لساحران, right? Or I don't know if this is really an option they consider, but in nafia, then la sahiran, if you did taqdir of it as illa, but that's more complicated. So the point is you're supposed to go for the clearest and easiest takhrij of it. But you see there's no explicit alif in this rasm. Assuming that the Masahif agreed on this point, then you could do taqdir of hadani, you could also do taqdir of hadaini. And some of the qira'at have in hadaini la sahiran. Right? So immediately we have a question as to what was it that they were actually problematizing. So when when Urwa, is asking Aisha about this, what did he see in the kitab that required the question? Right? I can't answer that for you just now. I'm putting that as an issue. And then وَالْمُقِيمِينَ الصَّلَاةِ, this is in the rasm, right? Where in the general flow of the ayah everything is marfu', and then وَالْمُقِيمِينَ الصَّلَاةِ is mansoob. I think everyone says it's mansoob على المدح, something like this, or al-ikhtisas. وَالْمُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةِ. And again, these are things which people point to and say these are errors in the Quran. I definitely remember Anis Shorosh raising these ones in some debate he did in Glasgow years and years ago with Shabir Ali, and yeah, he really thought he did something. وعن قوله إن الذين آمنوا والذين هادوا والصابئون, if you're following the ism inna and the atf on that, then it would be والصابئين. But since it's written صاد با واو نون صابون or صابئون, then Sabun is one of the readings, by the way. I'm not confusing you with soap or something, but it's just another one of the readings. فقالت يا ابن أخي هذا عمل الكتاب أخطأوا في الكتاب. Right. So this is the most kind of explicit one in claiming that it is an error as opposed to a feature, or just actually literally how the Quran is revealed. So this creates considerable ishkal. Now let's see what's in the notes. Okay, its chain is sound according to the conditions of the two sheikhs. Now, the author discusses this report later in the chapter, and regarding its chain of narration, we have here in the Mujamma al-Malik Fahd edition some issues regarding the riwayah of Abi Muawiyah from Hisham. So this issue of, Sahih ala Shart al-Shaykhain, of course, generally has its issues and objections to it, because the Shaykhain, if they did not include it, maybe it's not according to their shurut, but there is this attempt to do istikhraj, and then you've got the famous mustakhraj of al-Hakim, the mustadrak of al-Hakim, which then people say, maybe a lot of times things that he is saying are according to their shurut are not according to shurut for more subtle reasons. So it's generally said that he has some tasahul in that. Anyway, let's see some more narrations and then the discussion.
قال حدثنا حجاج عن هارون بن موسى أخبرني الزبير بن الخريث عن عكرمة قال لما كتبت المصاحف عرضت على عثمان فوجد فيها حروفا من اللحن فقال لا تغيروها فإن العرب ستغيرها، أو قال ستعربها بألسنتها. لو كان الكاتب من ثقيف والمملي من هذيل لم توجد فيه هذه الحروف. أخرج.
So this is a bit different.
ابن الأنباري في كتاب الرد على من خالف مصحف عثمان وابن أشته في كتاب المصاحف. ثم أخرج ابن الأنباري نحوه من طريق عبد الأعلى بن عبد الله بن عامر وابن أشتة نحوه من طريق يحيى بن يعمر. وأخرج من طريق أبي بشر عن سعيد بن جبير أنه كان يقرأ والمقيمين الصلاة ويقول هو لحن من الكاتب. وهذه الآثار مشكلة جدا. وكيف يظن بالصحابة أولا أنهم يلحنون في الكلام فضلا عن القرآن وهم الفصحاء اللد؟ ثم كيف يظن بهم ثانيا في القرآن الذي تلقوه من النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كما أنزل وحفظوه وضبطوه وأتقنوه؟ ثم كيف يظن بهم ثالثا اجتماعهم كلهم على الخطأ وكتابته؟ ثم كيف يظن بهم رابعا عدم تنبههم ورجوعهم عنه؟ ثم كيف يظن بعثمان أنه ينهى عن تغييره؟ ثم كيف يظن أن القراءة استمرت على مقتضى ذلك الخطأ وهو مروي بالتواتر خلفا عن سلف؟ هذا مما يستحيل عقلا وشرعا وعادة.
Okay, so I like the tone that the reader has taken on, right? So he's responded kind of, first of all, ijmalan, that we just simply cannot take these on their dhahir, right? Even if you accept the asanid, which is not binding to do so, but if they are strong asanid, it might not be easy to dispute them from that perspective, right? But also from a perspective of interpreting them. Huruf min al-lahn, here lahn might not be errors. He might be indicating the flexibility of the rasm to be pronounced correctly according to the way it's been revealed, according to the rukhsa that was given even to pronounce certain things in ways according to tribal dialects. And they will do i'rab of them. Here I translated potentially as make them fluent. Vocalize maybe is the way to put it, right? So it's a question of interpreting what is being asked about and what the answer contains. In this one, he used to recite وَالْمُقِيمِينَ الصَّلَاةِ and remark, it is lahn from the scribe. That sounds like a claim of error, but again, a lot depends on the exact words that are transmitted from these authorities like Saeed. So, the ijmali kind of answer to this is, first of all, we just cannot accept these as they are because the companions would not make those mistakes in their speech. And then they would not be so careless, as it sounds, in reciting and writing the Qur'an. And then the whole Uthmanic project of gathering people upon one mushaf was about ensuring that people will not differ over it. So how would he then sign off on things that he knows to be mistakes, right? So all of these things open the whole idea to critique.
وقد أجاب العلماء عن ذلك بثلاثة أجوبة. أحدها أن ذلك لا يصح عن عثمان، فإن إسناده ضعيف مضطرب منقطع، ولأن عثمان جعل للناس إماما يقتدون به، فكيف يرى فيه لحنا ويتركه لتقيمه العرب بألسنتها؟ فإذا كان الذين تولوا جمعه وكتابته لم يقيموا ذلك وهم الخيار، فكيف يقيمه غيرهم؟
I understand his point is that he was creating an imam, al-mushaf al-imam. Sometimes you say mushaf al-imam to do idafa, and you could understand it as the mushaf of Uthman, who is the imam. But mushaf al-imam, if we do idafa, is probably like idafa bayaniya, where the asl is that it is a sifa. Al-mushaf al-imam. Al-mushaf alladhi huwa al-imam.
فإنه لم يكتب مصحفا واحدا، بل كتب عدة مصاحف. فإن قيل إن اللحن وقع في جميعها فبعيد، أو في بعضها فهو اعتراف بصحة البعض. ولم يذكر أحد من الناس أن اللحن كان في مصحف دون مصحف، ولم تأتي المصاحف قط مختلفة إلا فيما هو من وجوه القراءة، وليس ذلك بلحن.
So we do have variation between the Uthmanic Masahif. Some reports say that he sent 4 of them. This is probably correct. Some say 7 or perhaps more to the different regions, the regional centers. And when the scholars later started to compile information about these, like Ibn Abi Dawood or like Abu Amr al-Dani, when they have compiled their books about that, they noted sometimes that this particular word, such and such word, was written in a slightly different way in the different masahif. So it has become quite a common view that Uthman himself, radiyallahu anhu, intended to open up some different possibilities in the different masahif for the qira'at. Right? I mean, qira'at, as we know them now, didn't exist in that period, but people were reading in different ways according to the ahruf. We're not going into what exactly is the ahruf and how does it relate to qira'at, but just the fact that people were reciting in slightly different ways, which was muhtamal by the rasm. But once Uthman established his rasm as the authoritative one, as they say, based on al-Arud al-Akhira, the final presentation of the Quran between Jibreel and Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salam in his last Ramadan. So the final Mus'haf is based on that. So things like taqdeem and ta'khir were ruled out. Things like certain, chunks of words that may have been present in the Quran, but then nusikhat, these are ruled out. So one way or another, the Uthmanic Mus'haf becomes the standard upon which any recitation has to be based, along with, the narration, transmission, and the Arabic language norms, right? So once he's established that, it becomes the basis. Some say he may have intended that in one Mus'haf he will write an alif here, and in another one he will leave the alif out, so that you can read here وَوَصَّى بِهَا Ibrahim, and the other one you can read وَأَوْصَى, right? And this might be the case, but again, it raises this question of, like, if his whole point was to establish the authoritative standard, why then did he start putting in some more multiplicity again, almost at the last second or from the back door, right? So just put with an alif or without an alif, that would be more consonant and consistent with his project. So it might be the case that the scribes, when they were copying these multiple masahif, one of them wrote it with an alif, one of them did not write it with the alif, and that might have just sort of passed like that. This might sound controversial. To make it slightly less controversial, let's just say, then it was all presented to Uthman, and he may have signed off on these small discrepancies, if you like, by which I just mean the differences between them, saying, well, it is recited as wawassa and it is recited as awsa, so this alif can stay, or the lack of this alif can stay like that. And then they were sent and approved as they were. So then the qira'at have to adhere to one or another of the masahif, right? So when we say the qira'ah has to adhere to the Uthmanic Mus'haf, in brackets, any of the Uthmanic Masahif, and also with certain types of taqdeer, as I said to you before, to read كذلك نُجِّي الْمُؤْمِنِينَ actually doesn't require any taqdeer, right? It's a tricky one to do takhrij of the Arabic of it, but to read وَكَذَلِكَ نُنْجِي الْمُؤْمِنِينَ requires you to read an extra noon, which is muhtamal, right? It's not difficult, not problematic at all. These are the kind of things that can be read in. Could you perhaps have read وَأَوْصَى onto the script وَوَصَّى? Maybe that alif, no, because that's an alif with Hamza. Maybe that one, no. But in any case, some of the masahif have got the alif and some don't. Right. So this is not the point that he's raising, but it's something sort of following from this issue of the multiple masahif, right? So these things, وَالْمُقِيمِينَ الصَّلَاةِ, if it's an error, why is it in all the masahif, right? If we say that it's an error, then how did they keep making the error over and over? You see how that becomes less probable. If you say that it's in some masahif, but other masahif have got it right, it says muqimun, then we are saying the other ones are correct. But this is not the claim, this is not the issue that's being raised, right? So let me say something here. These are points being made kind of with a somewhat limited data set of what the masahif, early masahif are displaying. Now we actually have other opportunities to look at that data and to consider the history and the situation as it was and as it is. And that's not to say we have access to all the Uthmanic masahif or something, but we have access to things which are their descendants. And those who are working on masahif now, including Muslim scholars in the Arab world, some in the West, non-Muslim scholars as well, they are tracing the relationship between the masahif and establishing that there is such a thing as an Uthmanic archetype. People like Marine, who I mentioned to you, and Haytham Sidqi in the US as well, they have established that there clearly is an Uthmanic project that took place at the time that our tradition says that it took place. because you can see how these early Masahif relate to each other. Also, there is strong reason to accept the fact that there were four archetypes that have very slight variations between them, from which the other Masahif descended. So this type of study is bringing us back to what we already understand about the basic, the bare bones of the Uthmanic project. But then when it comes to a thing like, okay, the Masahif do not differ from each other on this point, these are things that can be looked at again, reassessed, reevaluated to establish what exactly is going on. But here he is saying they don't differ on these points, right? But they differ on various things that are in matters of recitation. And that he would mean things like وَوَصَّى وَأَوْصَى, neither of which is claimed to be a mistake, of course.
الجواب الثاني: على تقدير صحة الرواية إن ذلك محمول على الرمز والإشارة ومواضع الحذف، نحو قوله الكتاب الصابرين وما أشبه ذلك. الجواب الثالث أنه مؤول على أشياء خالف لفظها رسمها، كما كتبوا لا أذبحنه بألف بعد لا، وجزاء الظالمين بواو وألف، وبأيد بياءين، فلو قرئ بظاهر الخط لكان لحنا. وبهذا الجواب وما قبله جزم ابن أشته في كتاب المصاحف. وقال ابن الأنباري في كتاب الرد على من خالف مصحف عثمان في الأحاديث المروية عن عثمان في ذلك: لا تقوم بها حجة لأنها منقطعة غير متصلة، وما يشهد عقل بأن عثمان وهو إمام الأئمة الذي هو إمام الناس في وقته وقدوتهم يجمعهم على المصحف الذي هو الإمام فيتبين فيه خللا، ويشاهد في خطه زللا فلا يصلحه. كلا والله ما يتوهم عليه هذا ذو إنصاف وتمييز، ولا يعتقد أنه أخر الخطأ في الكتاب ليصلحه من بعده، وسبيل الجائين من بعده البناء على رسمه والوقوف عند حكمه. ومن زعم أن عثمان أراد بقوله أرى فيه لحنا أرى في خطه لحنا إذا أقمناه بألسنتنا كان لحن الخط غير مفسد ولا محرف من جهة تحريف الألفاظ وإفساد الإعراب فقد أبطل ولم يصب، لأن الخط منبئ عن النطق، فمن لحن في كتبه فهو لاحن في نطقه. ولم يكن عثمان ليؤخر فسادا في هجاء ألفاظ القرآن من جهة كتب ولا نطق. ومعلوم أنه كان مواصلا لدرس القرآن متقنا لألفاظه موافقا على ما رسم في المصاحف المنفذة إلى الأمصار والنواحي. ثم أيد ذلك بما أخرجه أبو عبيد قال: حدثنا عبد الرحمن بن مهدي عن عبد الله بن المبارك حدثنا أبو وائل شيخ من أهل اليمن عن هانئ البربري مولى عثمان قال: كنت عند عثمان وهم يعرضون المصاحف، فأرسلني بكتف شاة إلى أبي بن كعب فيها لم يتسنى، وفيها لا تبديل للخلق، وفيها فأمهل الكافرين. قال: فدعا بالدوات فمحى أحد اللامين فكتب لا تبديل لخلق الله، ومحى فأمهل، وكتب فمهل، وكتب لم يتسنه ألحق فيها الهاء. قال ابن الأنباري: فكيف يدعى عليه أنه رأى فسادا فأمضاه وهو يوقف على ما كتب، ويرفع الخلاف إليه الواقع من الناسخين ليحكم بالحق ويلزمهم إثبات الصواب وتخليده. انتهى.
Okay, so I let that run a little bit. I was also having a look for a book by Ghanem Qaduri al-Hamad. I think I've packed it away somewhere else. I think it's called Ulum al-Qur'an Bayna al-Masadir wal-Masahif, something like this. So basically, I haven't read it yet, but basically I think that the Sheikh Ghanem al-Hamad is, pointing to what I was roughly saying, that sometimes there are things which are in the Ulum al-Qur'an books that we can look at the data of the Masahif to, just to have a fresh look and base that on the information that is available. And these Masahif, bear in mind, have been preserved by the Muslims and they've been preserved by the Orientalists as well. You've got some big projects in the West which have, scanned and documented and analyzed the manuscripts, especially Corpus Coranicum out of Berlin, which is a resource that people can look at the various manuscripts which are often kept in the libraries and museums of Europe. So, this is just the story as it is. And then, of course, they are the ones who have been analyzing the Sana'a palimpsest. I won't go into that, but basically something that was found in Yemen, in which there are two layers of text, and the top layer, the visible layer, corresponds to the Uthmanic recension, and the lower layer has got some differences. So there's been a lot of discussion amongst the academics as to why that is, what the differences are, what are we looking at here? Some have suggested it was like a training text. Somebody was just copying out and they made a lot of mistakes, so no big deal. Or some have said it is, and this seems to be the argument that is winning, it is a mushaf from the earliest time that may be a sahabi's copy, and it doesn't match the Uthmanic recension. But you see, that doesn't like threaten our existence or our scholarship at all, because exactly what our tradition is telling us, and these riwayat are telling us, is that people had individual copies of the Quran, and when Uthman gathered them upon al-Imam, he ordered that all the other ones be burnt. So this could, for example, be a copy that wasn't burnt, but was just instead washed over with water and then written over with the finalized, agreed upon text. So anyway, it is important for us to keep abreast of developments in research about our masadir, right? And we should actually be at the forefront of them. Instead, other people typically are taking the lead in this research, and then we are going to start refuting them and complaining about them and calling them out for their agenda. Like, where's your agenda, ya Muslimun? Have an agenda and then, leave others behind. This is our history. This is our turath. Anyway, so that we've gone through some of the possibilities and how to understand these narrations. So let's see the footnote here. So writing the word with the alif. So it's like when he says lahan, he might mean something like that, a kind of taqdeer that has to be made by the reader. Okay, let's continue. You're all very quiet, so you must be very, very comfortable with this topic then. Or just completely stunned and speechless, I don't know.
قلت ويؤيد هذا أيضا ما أخرجه ابن أشته في كتاب المصاحف قال حدثنا الحسن بن عثمان أنبأنا الربيع بن بدر عن سوار بن شبيب قال سألت ابن الزبير عن المصاحف فقال قام رجل إلى عمر فقال يا أمير المؤمنين إن الناس قد اختلفوا في القرآن فكان عمر قد هم أن يجمع القرآن على قراءة واحدة فطعن طعنته التي مات بها فلما كان في خلافة عثمان قام ذلك الرجل فذكر له فجمع عثمان المصاحف ثم بعثني إلى عائشة فجئت بالصحف فعرضناها عليها حتى قومناها ثم أمر بسائرها فشققت فهذا يدل على أنهم ضبطوها وأتقنوها ولم يتركوا فيها ما يحتاج إلى إصلاح ولا تقويم. ثم قال ابن أشته أنبأنا محمد بن يعقوب أنبأنا أبو داود سليمان بن الأشعث أنبأنا أحمد بن مسعدة أنبأنا إسماعيل أخبرني الحارث بن عبد الرحمن عن عبد الأعلى بن عبد الله بن عامر قال لما فرغ من المصحف أتي به عثمان فنظر فيه فقال أحسنتم وأجملتم أرى شيئا سنقيمه بألسنتنا فهذا الأثر لا إشكال فيه وبه يتضح معنى ما تقدم فكأنه عرض عليه عقب الفراغ من كتابته فرأى فيه شيئا كتب على غير لسان قريش كما وقع لهم في التابوت بالتاء المربوطة والتابوت بالتاء المفتوحة فوعد بأنه سيقيمه على لسان قريش ثم وفى بذلك عن العرض والتقويم ولم يترك فيه شيئا ولعل من روى تلك الآثار السابقة عنه حرفها ولم يتقن اللفظ الذي صدر عن عثمان فلزم منه ما لزم من الإشكال فهذا أقوى ما يجاب عن ذلك ولله الحمد.
Okay, so in the end, riwayah bil ma'na comes into play, right? If you just tweak the exact words that Uthman said in some small way, according to what you think is equivalent, you can end up changing what was intended. So that may well be what has happened. So at this point, he's responded really regarding the Uthman narration, but we need to go back to what was mentioned from Aisha, which was stronger wording, I would say.
وبعد فهذه الأجوبة لا يصلح منها شيء عن حديث عائشة أما الجواب بالتضعيف فلأن إسناده صحيح كما ترى وأما الجواب بالرمز وما بعده فلأن سؤال عروة عن الأحرف المذكورة لا يطابقه، فقد أجاب عنه ابن أشته وتبعه ابن جبارة في شرح الرائية بأن معنى قولها أخطأوا أي في اختيار الأولى من الأحرف السبعة لجمع الناس عليه، لا أن الذي كتبوه من ذلك خطأ لا يجوز. قال: والدليل على ذلك أن ما لا يجوز مردود بإجماع من كل شيء وإن طالت مدة وقوعه. قال: وأما قول سعيد بن جبير لحن من الكاتب فيعني باللحن القراءة واللغة، يعني أنها لغة الذي كتبها وقراءته، وفيها قراءة أخرى. ثم أخرج عن إبراهيم النخعي أنه قال: إن هذان لساحران وإن هذين لساحران سواء، لعلهم كتبوا الألف مكان الياء، والواو في قوله والصابئون مكان الياء. قال ابن أشته: يعني أنه من إبدال حرف في الكتاب بحرف، مثل الصلاة والزكاة والحياة كتبوها بالواو. وأقول هذا الجواب إنما يحسن لو كانت القراءة بالياء فيها والكتابة بخلافها، وأما القراءة على مقتضى الرسم فلا. وقد تكلم أهل العربية على هذه الأحرف ووجهوها على أحسن توجيه. أما قوله إن هذان لساحران
Just pause for a second. Go back to my preferred transliteration scheme here. Especially because the whole point is we're talking about the use of the ta marbuta, which I want to use the H for, versus the ta maftuha, mabsuta, which I would use T for, right, in this situation. Regarding inna hadain, perhaps they wrote alif in place of the ya. So this indicates that they were looking at a mushaf where there was an alif written. So that could well be the case. Just fixing the position of that. Then when he mentions al-rasikhun, let me see, did I أريد بها ما بعدها, right? So I guess I've just followed their footnote here. He means that a letter is written in place of another one. Right. Okay, the experts of Arabic have discussed the likes of inna hadani lasahiran, again, according to that narration, according to that recitation.
فيه أوجه. أحدها أنه جار على لغة من يجري المثنى بالألف في أحواله الثلاث، وهي لغة مشهورة لكنانة، وقيل لبني الحارث. الثاني أن اسم إن ضمير الشأن محذوفا، والجملة مبتدأ وخبر خبر إن.
So the first is that there's a lugha in which this is fine. So we talk about lughat earlier on in chapter 37. There it was about word items, but there was some reference to grammatical features as well. And maybe this one came up there, I don't remember. But things like, sometimes you've got the word with, what's the example? Yushaqiq and yushaqa, right? Where there's idgham or there's fak of the mudgham. Some of them are according to what's normal in that dialect, and some of them is normal in this dialect, right? So here, for example, could this just be part of the Arabic tongue, which is known from Kinana, for example, or Banu Harith, that is inna hadani. Hadani is ismu inna, but they just keep hadani, hadani, hadani. They don't say hadani, hadaini, hadaini. Right? Ism of inna, Damir al-Sha'na explained here. So I mentioned this before as if it's mukhaffafa in hadani, that's normal. You do takhfif of it and you do hadf of Damir al-Sha'n. It's not normal to say inna and then have Damir al-Sha'n mahdhuf, but it could be a takhrij here.
الثالث كذلك إلا أن ساحران خبر مبتدأ محذوف والتقدير لهما ساحران. الرابع أن هنا بمعنى نعم. الخامس أن ها ضمير القصة اسم إنه، وذان لساحران مبتدأ وخبر، وتقدم رد هذا الوجه بانفصال إن واتصالها في الرسم. قلت وظهر لي وجه آخر وهو الإتيان بالألف لمناسبة ساحران يريدان، كما نون سلاسلا لمناسبة وأغلالا، وكذلك نون عن من سبأ لمناسبة بنبأ. وأما قوله والمقيمين الصلاة ففيه أيضا أوجه. أحدها أن
Pause for a second just to see if anything else comes up. Inna could mean na'am, This was mentioned in chapter 40. The ha, but this is tricky because of the issue of actually respecting the rasm, right? Innaha dhani al-sahiran, right? So this has to be ruled out. This was mentioned earlier. One more explanation occurs to me, to Suyuti. The alif is kind of okay. Sahirani yuridani. Just kind of as a feature of sound, if you like. A bit like what we said about the jiwar in وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلِكُمْ, just purely for the basis of sound and fluency, and not supposed to be looked at as affecting i'rab. Such as salasilan, according to some of the narrations, is to correspond to aghlalan, and in min saba'in, binaba'in, because the norm would be min saba'a. Okay. So how about والمقيمين الصلاة?
هو مقطوع إلى المدح بتقدير أمدح لأنه أبلغ. الثاني أنه معطوف على المجرور في يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك، أي ويؤمنون بالمقيمين الصلاة وهم الأنبياء، وقيل الملائكة، وقيل التقدير يؤمنون بدين المقيمين الصلاة، فيكون المراد بهم المسلمين، وقيل بإجابة المقيمين. الثالث إنه معطوف على قبل، أي ومن قبل المقيمين، فحذفت قبل وأقيم المضاف إليه مقامه. الرابع أنه معطوف على الكاف في قبلك. الخامس أنه معطوف على الكاف في إليك. السادس أنه معطوف على الضمير في منهم. حكى هذه الأوجه أبو البقاء.
As I told you, sometimes you say Abu al-Baqa, Amin al-Uqbari, who was mentioned at the beginning of this chapter. So a number of these explanations require quite a strained interpretation of meaning, right? So the simplest one, I would say, is the first. And it's a type of emphasis, singling out something for special praise, special mention. Some of these require a translation which one might not be satisfied with. والصابئون.
وأما قوله والصابئون ففيه أيضا أوجه، أحدها أنه مبتدأ حذف خبره، أي والصابئون كذلك. الثاني أنه معطوف على محل إن مع اسمها، فإن محلهما رفع بالابتداء. الثالث أنه معطوف على الفاعل في هادوا. الرابع أن إن بمعنى نعم، فالذين آمنوا وما بعده في موضع رفع، والصابئون عطف عليها. الخامس أنه على إجراء صيغة الجمع مجرى المفرد، والنون حرف الإعراب. حكى هذه الأوجه أبو البقاء.
Okay. So these are various grammatical takes on it, which slightly, this one changes the meaning of inna. It means yes instead of being the harf al-tawqid as such. Yes, those who believe, and then alladhina, instead of being thought of as ismu inna mansub, is just seen as marfu', and then as-sabi'un is according to what you'd expect. It's at-takhrij. That's all we're saying about it.
تذنيب. يقرب مما تقدم عن عائشة ما أخرجه الإمام أحمد في مسنده وابن أشته في المصاحف من طريق إسماعيل المكي عن أبي خلف مولى بني جمح أنه دخل مع عبيد بن عمير على عائشة رضي الله عنها فقال: جئت أسألك عن آية في كتاب الله تعالى، كيف كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقرأها؟ قالت: أية آية؟ قال: والذين يؤتون ما آتوا، أو والذين يأتون ما آتوا. فقالت: أيتهما أحب إليك؟ قلت: والذي نفسي بيده لأحدهما أحب إلي من الدنيا جميعا. قالت: أيهما؟ قالت: والذين يأتون ما آتوا. فقالت: أشهد أن
والذين يأتون ما أتوا. Right? So either you're reading it as the verb is ata yu'ti, or you're reading the verb as ata ya'ti, right? So here she's being asked about this verse, and she says one of them is more beloved, and that is the reading with the form one verb, ata ya'ti. وَالَّذِينَ يَأْتُونَ مَا أَتَوْا. Right? So يَأْتُونَ is مضارع, and أتوا is ماضي.
رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كذاك كان يقرأها وكذلك أنزلت ولكن الهجاء حرف. وما أخرجه ابن جرير وسعيد بن منصور في سننه من طريق سعيد بن جبير عن ابن عباس في قوله حتى تستأنسوا وتسلموا، قال إنما هي خطأ من الكاتب حتى تستأذنوا وتسلموا. أخرجه ابن أبي حاتم بلفظ هو فيما أحسب مما أخطأت به الكتاب. وما أخرجه ابن الأنباري من طريق عكرمة عن ابن عباس أنه قرأ أفلم يتبين الذين آمنوا أن لو يشاء الله لهدى الناس جميعا، فقيل له إنها في المصحف أفلم ييأس، فقال أظن الكاتب كتبها وهو ناعس.
I mean, these are like scandalous narrations almost, right? So these are things that do get circulated by critics of Islam and people trying to create a problem. So it's important to investigate them from all these angles.
وما أخرجه سعيد بن منصور من طريق سعيد بن جبير عن ابن عباس أنه كان يقول في قوله تعالى وقضى ربك إنما هي ووصى ربك التزقت الواو بالصاد. وأخرجه ابن أشتة بلفظ استمد مدادا كثيرا فالتزقت الواو بالصاد. وأخرجه من طريق أخرى عن الضحاك أنه قال كيف تقرأ هذا الحرف؟ قال وقضى ربك، قال ليس كذلك نقرأها نحن ولا ابن عباس إنما هي ووصى ربك، وكذلك كانت تقرأ وتكتب، فاستمد كاتبكم فاحتمل القلم مدادا كثيرا فالتصقت الواو بالصاد، ثم قرأ ولقد وصينا الذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبلكم وإياكم أن اتقوا الله، ولو كانت قضى من الرب لم يستطع أحد رد قضاء الرب ولكنه وصية أوصى بها العباد. وما أخرجه سعيد بن منصور وغيره من طريق عمرو بن دينار عن عكرمة عن ابن عباس أنه كان يقرأ ولقد آتينا موسى وهارون الفرقان وضياء، ويقول خذوا هذه الواو واجعلوها هنا والذين قال لهم الناس إن الناس قد جمعوا لكم الآية. وأخرجه ابن أبي حاتم من طريق الزبير بن خريت عن عكرمة عن ابن عباس قال انزعوا هذه الواو فاجعلوها في الذين يحملون العرش ومن حوله. وما أخرجه ابن أشته وابن أبي.
So the idea in this last narration is that there's one here that shouldn't be here, and in an ayah elsewhere there's a waw that should be there. So just take this waw and put it there. Kind of cute way of saying there's an extra waw here and there's a missing waw there. These are things that might vary in some of the masahif. Okay, remove this one and place it before الذين يحملون العرش.
حاتم من طريق عطاء عن ابن عباس في قوله تعالى مثل نوره كمشكاة، قال هي خطأ من الكاتب، هو أعظم من أن يكون نوره مثل نور المشكاة، إنما هي مثل نور المؤمن كمشكاة. وقد أجاب ابن أشته عن هذه الآثار كلها.
So he read it as huwa and it says here and I put God is too glorious. So if it's here, what would it refer to? مثل نوره كمشكاة. What would it be if it's here? Can anyone see that? I mean, هو أعظم is a clear enough meaning. But I'm not sure what would here أعظم mean. But anyway, one way or another, the general meaning is clear. مثل نور المؤمن. So how did Ibn Ashta respond to this مجموع?
لأن المراد أخطأوا في الاختيار وما هو الأولى لجمع الناس عليه من الأحرف السبعة، لا أن الذي كتب خطأ خارج عن القرآن. قال فمعنى قول عائشة حرف الهجاء ألقى إلى الكاتب هجاء غير ما كان الأولى أن يلقى إليه من الأحرف السبعة. قال وكذا معنى قول ابن عباس كتبها وهو ناعس، يعني فلم يتدبر الوجه الذي هو أولى من الآخر، وكذا سائرها. وأما ابن الأنباري فإنه جنح إلى تضعيف الروايات ومعارضتها بروايات أخر عن ابن عباس وغيره بثبوت هذه الأحرف في القراءة، والجواب الأول أولى وأقعد. ثم قال ابن أشته حدثنا أبو العباس محمد بن يعقوب حدثنا أبو داود حدثنا ابن الأسود حدثنا.
It's very nice. أولى وأقعد. Translation is okay. Is better and more thorough. What he means is أقعد. Maybe I'll come up with something better. It's more systematic. It presents itself more as a qaida that you can then analogize to other riwayat which might be presented, right? Which is to say, أخطأوا في الاختيار بين الاحتمالات من الأحرف السبعة, right? So that idea you can then apply to any time the word أخطأ or something like that comes up.
يا ابن آدم عن عبد الرحمن بن أبي زناد عن أبيه عن خارجة بن زيد قال قالوا لزيد يا أبا سعيد أوهمت إنما هي 8 أزواج من الضأن 2 ومن المعز 2 ومن الإبل 2 ومن البقر 2 فقال لأن الله تعالى يقول فجعل منه الزوجين الذكر والأنثى فهما زوجان كل واحد منهما زوج الذكر زوج والأنثى زوج. قال ابن أشته فهذا الخبر يدل على أن القوم يتخيرون أجمع الحروف للمعاني وأسلسها على الألسنة وأقربها في المأخذ وأشهرها عند العرب للكتاب في المصاحف, وأن الأخرى كانت قراءة معروفة عند كلهم, وكذا ما أشبه ذلك. انتهى.
Okay, so it deserves more pondering on, but when this person is objecting, right, and they're saying to Zayd ibn Thabit, it should be like this, اثنين. Now, is that because he heard it that way, it was being recited that way, and it is correct in Arabic, or just in his version of Arabic, he thinks it should say that here, shouldn't it? So Zayd, have you missed out a word? 2 by 2. So Zayd gives up his answer from the Arabic language, so he understands that it is min al-baqar ithnaini, etc., just ithnain, because in the other ayah, فَجَعَلَ مِنْهُ الزَّوْجَيْنِ الذَّكْرَ وَالْأُنْثَى, right? So each one of them is a zawj. Right? The male is a zawj, the female is a zawj. So the meaning of the word zawj is a part of a pair, right? It is a half of a pair. So once that is established, then it shows that the point that he's making, Ibn Ashta is making by narrating this, is to say they were very thoughtful about the words. They were aware of what they were writing down. It wasn't just happening, the kind of thing you'd be drowsy and, right, as has been suggested by some of the reports. Should I bring up something controversial? I don't want to, but something in my nafs is calling me to. I don't remember the exact words that this person used, but there was a case recently where somebody in modern, like very recently, made a kind of claim about an error of the scribes. And he worded it in such a way which was full of iham, and just was not clear that this person himself understood what he was saying, what he was claiming, or what the implications would be of that claim. So he was talking about Az-Zukhruf, ayah 61. وَإِنَّهُ لَعِلْمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ فَلَا تَمْتَرُنَّ بِهَا. And this refers most clearly to Isa alayhi salam. وَإِنَّهُ لَعِلْمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ. So he was saying that it should be وَإِنَّهُ لَعَلَمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ. Let me look into Tafsir al-Alusi for a moment about this. I'm trying to see if he mentions لَعَلَمٌ, maybe in the Shawad. Yeah. قال ابن خالوي وأبو نصرة لعلم معرفا or للعلم maybe. The problem is when you're looking at the online version and not the muhakkak text, you are dealing with mistakes, right? So anyway, this person made an allegation, and then people reacted very strongly against him, rightly, because he shouldn't be saying things like that. And if you're going to make the point, make it with a decent wording that's not going to send people into confusion and crisis. I'm just looking at in the qira'at mutawatira, we just have وَإِنَّهُ لَعِلْمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ. But one of the ways of understanding that is much like لَعَلَمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ, as a sign, right? So you can understand it that way. You don't have to then say that when the people were writing the Qur'an, they made a mistake. That's what this person said. right? So which people are you talking about? Which people are you talking about that were writing the Quran and made a mistake in لَعِلْمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ versus لَعَلَمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ? First of all, the rasm is the same for the two, right? So it's the Qurra who conveyed and اختاروا, if you like, لَعِلْمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ, and they agreed on that. That the 10 Qurra agree on that. Why have none of them chosen to recite لَعَلَمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ, which is possible from the rasm? So the issue is not about what the scribes wrote, and the scribes were not generally writing the vowels. Sometimes they would write vowels in end of words and things like that in some of the earliest masahif, yes, but it's not clear what this person is claiming. But what he sounded like he's saying is there's tahrif in the Quran, so people rose and made takfir of him, and I think that takfir is not justified, because exactly what his point was, this ta'wil of it. But really, a person who claims to be involved in ilm should not be opening their mouth with such disasters. Right. And by the way, it's a person who likes to call other people dum-dum. So, an evil part of me takes some delight in the person being mudam-dum. Right, beneficial point. Words recited in 3 ways.
فائدة: فيما قرئ بثلاثة أوجه: الإعراب أو البناء أو نحو ذلك. قد رأيت تأليفا لطيفا لأحمد بن يوسف وابن مالك الرعيني سماه تحفة الأقران فيما قرئ بالتثليث من حروف القرآن. ذكر منها: الحمد لله قرئ بالرفع على الابتداء والنصب على المصدر والكسر على اتباع الدال اللام في حركتها. رب العالمين قرئ بالجر على أنه نعت، وبالرفع على القطع بإضمار مبتدأ، وبالنصب عليه بإضمار فعل أو على النداء. الرحمن الرحيم قرئ بالثلاثة: الرحمن الرحيم، الرحمن الرحيم، الرحمن الرحيم. 12 عينا قرئ بسكون الشين وهي لغة تميم، وكسرها وهي لغة الحجاز، وفتحها وهي لغة. بين المرء قرئ بتثليث الميم لغات فيه، فبهت الذي كفر. قراءة الجماعة بالبناء للمفعول، وقرئ بالبناء للفاعل بوزن ضرب وعلم وحسن. فبهت فبهت فبهت. ذرية بعضها من بعض قرئ بتثليث الذال، ذرية ذرية ذرية. واتقوا الله الذي
Sorry, I feel like the reader is tasking himself, لزوم ما لا يلزم. Did anyone ask him to read it in the 3 ways? But it's nice, okay. That's what I did in the translation as well.
تساءلون به والأرحام قرئ بالنصب عطفا على لفظ الجلالة، وبالجر عطفا على ضمير به، وبالرفع على الابتداء والخبر محذوف، أي والأرحام مما يجب أن تتقوه وأن تحتاطوا لأنفسكم. لا يستوي القاعدون من المؤمنين غير أولي الضرر. قرئ بالرفع غير أولي الضرر صفة لقاعدون، وبالجر غير أولي الضرر صفة للمؤمنين، وبالنصب غير أولي الضرر على الاستثناء.
So, this is just giving you a quick, it's almost like a cute little collection of thulathiyat, but it's a very good snapshot of a field, right? So you will find this stuff in some of the books of tafsir, the mutawwalat, but especially in the books of tawjih al-qira'at, and especially in books of tawjih al-qira'at al-shawadh as well, because, for example here, wal-arhama wal-arhami, yes, you can find that in books of tafsir in general, and by the way, wal-arhami, you could find that a number of the A'imma criticized this reading in very strong terms, like Imam al-Tabari, which is not politically correct now to criticize the qira'at, but he was speaking from a time before there was a thing called the 7 qira'at, and an established norm that everything in those 7 qira'at as canonized must be accepted. So read it in that context, and take his points with their own value. It could well be that the other qira'ah is clearer and more fluent and more consonant with meaning, etc., etc. It's not politically correct to say that. I could get in trouble for saying it, but all I'm trying to do is to speak in the spirit of the Mufassirin. And of course, if you are reciting in the qira'ah of Ibn Amir, you will say wal arhami, and that's fine, and there is takhrij of it. So we are seeing sometimes the ayat present a certain difficulty in interpreting, and then occasionally you have to reach for a slightly more complicated interpretation and explanation and i'rab. So that applies when we're looking at the qira'at, that some qira'at are more complicated than others. Wal arhama is easier because atf wattaqullah wal arhama, right? Wal arhami tasa'aluna bihi wal arhami grammatically raises some contention. Or is it waw of qasam or something like that? There's suggestions. But then he mentions a reading in the nominative wal arhamu, but that won't be discussed in the books of Tawjih al-Qira'at al-Mutawatira or al-Qira'at al-Sab' or al-Qira'at al-Ashr. It would be discussed elsewhere in books of i'rab al-Qira'at al-Shadha, like the book of Ibn Khalaway, like the book of Ibn Jinni al-Muhtasab, things like this. So here you're getting an idea of what happens there, right? So each one is explained in a certain way and appealing to different rules of the Arabic language, and is just very good for building your flexibility, your mental flexibility to understand how to do takhrij and tawjih of different things and how things are explained grammatically and with respect to the Arabic language. So if you have the interest in it, I encourage you to delve into those works.
امسحوا برؤوسكم وأرجلكم. قرئ بالنصب عطفا على الأيدي، وبالجر على الجوار أو غيره، وبالرفع على الابتداء والخبر محذوف دل عليه ما قبله، وأرجلكم وأرجلكم وأرجلكم. فجزاء مثل.
I mean, what I can do here is I can go into Mu'jam al-Qira'at of al-Khatib and see who these various readings are attributed to. In fact, it might be mentioned here. I mean, in terms of the قال الحسن بالرفع وهي قراءة شاذة. Okay, so you know, we can mention that, but I didn't see it as particularly useful for the English reader, at least when I was doing this before.
ما قتل من النعم. قرئ بجر.
Also because I wanted to really give a clear sense of, you know, priority to the canonical readings.
مثل بإضافة جزاء إليه، وبرفعه وتنوين مثل صفة له، وبنصبه مفعول بجزاء. والله ربنا. قرئ بجر ربنا نعتا أو بدلا، وبنصبه والله ربنا على النداء أو بإضمار أمدح، وبرفعه والله ربنا والله ربنا، برفعه ورفع لفظ الجلالة مبتدأ وخبر. ويذرك وآلهتك. قرئ برفع.
Sorry, no, he is saying the third reading is Wallahu Rabbuna, nominative as subject and predicate. Right, interesting.
يذرك يذرك ونصبه وجزمه للخفة. فأجمعوا أمركم وشركاءكم. قرئ بنصب شركاءكم مفعولا معه أو معطوفا أو بتقدير وادعوا، وبرفعه شركاءكم عطفا على ضمير فأجمعوا أو مبتدأ خبره محذوف، وبجره وشركائكم عطفا على كم في أمركم أمركم.
Okay, so this example will come up in a moment about واو المعية, right? مفعول معه, which is just coming up at the end. Oh, apologies. So reciting the accusative as an accompanying object. وشركاءكم. So here we cannot just say it's واو العطف. Remember I said to you about, someone asked me recently about ولقد آتيناك سبعا من المثاني والقرآن العظيم. I said, could واو والقرآن العظيم be واو المعية and al-Qur'an be مفعول معه? I said there's no point. This is عطف. Whereas here فأجمعوا أمركم وشركاءكم. أجمع, by the way, people trip up on. Might need to check some of the translations here. أجمعوا أمركم means like gather your resolve. We can use the word gather in that, just in that expression, but it doesn't mean gather as such, because that's jama'a, فَجْمَعُوا أَمْرَكُمْ. Nor does it mean, come to a consensus, ijma' in the later sense, in the Quranic usage. فَلَمَّا ذَهَبُوا بِهِ in Surah Yusuf, فَلَمَّا ذَهَبُوا بِهِ وَأَجْمَعُوا أَن يَجْعَلُوهُ فِي غَيَابَةِ الْجُبِّ. It's not at this point, after having taken him from Yaqub alayhi salam and got to the, gone all the way out, then they came to the consensus and agreement that they will put him into the well. Because previously, as the Quran tells us, someone suggested this about putting him in the well. The agreement was made. So, وَأَجْمَعُوا أَن يَجْعَلُوهُ فِي غَيَابَةِ الْجُبِّ means they gathered their determination and their resolve to do that. فَأَجْمِعُوا أَمْرَكُمْ وَشُرَكَاءَكُمْ. It can be like gather your associates. I'm curious now about the translation. So have a look. 1071. Sometimes I come to something like this and I say, I just know what's going to happen. I don't know, but I know. Let's go to the earliest ones. Lay your design against me and assemble your false gods. Interesting. Literary, I'm not sure what to make of it. Let's go Muhammad Asad. Decide. That's fine. Ajmi'u amrakum. And call to your aid. He's had to put some brackets here because he's not maybe entirely sure how to understand. وَشُرَكَاءَكُمْ. وَشُرَكَاءَكُم then, if مفعول معه means with, along with, right? Let's see some of the later ones. Study Quran. So decide on your plan, you and your partners. Right, that's مفعول معه. Good. Khattab. Devise a plot along with your associate gods. That's مفعول معه. Summon up your affair along with your, along with is a good way of saying conspire together along with your partners. Okay, agree on your course of action, you and your partners. That's fine. My fear was that some people might say gather your matter and your associates. You see, decide upon your course of action and gather your associates. So here Muhammad Ali, one of the founders of Lahore Ahmadis, he's assuming there has to be a taqdeer of a verb, which is, فَأَجْمِعُوا أَمْرَكُمْ وَجْمَعُوا شُرَكَاءَكُمْ. Right? But there's no need for that if you see it as مفعول معه. Let's leave the translations now. Let's continue.
وكأي من آية في السماوات والأرض يمرون عليها. قرئ بجر الأرض عطفا على ما قبله، وبنصبها من باب الاشتغال، وبرفعها على الابتداء والخبر ما بعدها. ما أخلفنا موعدك بملكنا. قرئ بتثليث الميم، بملكنا بملكنا بملكنا. وحرام على قرية.
Oh, I should say, having looked at this again, he does actually gives us this possibility بنصب شركائكم مفعولا معه أو معطوفا. That's tricky though. أجمعوا شركائكم أو بتقدير ودعوا, right? So that you could assume a verb as Muhammad Ali did and maybe some others, right? Or it could be وشركاؤكم, but that might need a different rasm, right? Because you would expect a wow here in that situation. Conjoined to the subject فأجمعوا أنتم وشركاؤكم. And this, as I recently was reading in another situation, is allowed by the Kufans, but not by, the Basrans. And then, or is a genitive conjoined to the pronoun أجمعوا أمركم وأمر شركائكم. Awkward. Okay, continue.
قرئ بلفظ الماضي بفتح الراء وكسرها وضمها، وبلفظ الوصف بكسر الراء وسكونها مع فتح الحاء، وحرام بالفتح وألف، فهذه 7 قراءات. كوكب دري قرئ بتفسير.
So not all of these are related to Arab, you know, بملكنا بملكنا بملكنا. The Arab is the same, but the meaning of the word varies.
الدال كوكب دري كوكب دري كوكب دري. ياسين القراءة المشهورة بسكون النون، وقرئ شاذا بالفتح للخفة والكسر لالتقاء الساكنين وبالضم على النداء. سواء للسائلين قرئ بالنصب على الحال، وشاذا بالرفع أي هو سواء للسائلين، وبالجر حملا على الأيام سواء للسائلين. ولا تحين مناص قرئ بنصب حين ورفعه وجره، ولا تحين مناص ولا تحين مناص ولا تحين مناص. وقيده يا ربي قرئ بالنصب على المصدر وبالجر وتقدم توجيهه، وشاذا بالرفع عطفا على علم الساعة.
Order changed a bit.
قاف القراءة المشهورة بالسكون، وقرئ شاذا بالفتح والكسر كما مر. الحبك فيه 7 قراءات، ضم الحاء والباء الحبك، وكسرهما الحبك، وفتحهما الحبك، وضم الحاء وسكون الباء وضمها الحبك، وفتح الباء وكسرها الحبك الحبك، وسكون الباء وكسرها وضم الباء.
I was going to give you 7 out of 7, but
والحب ذو العصف والريحان قرئ برفع 3 ونصبها وجرها. وحور عين كأمثال اللؤلؤ قرئ برفعهما وجرهما ونصبهما بفعل.
obviously though if it changes needs a different rasm. And I've said this, right? Ibn Amir's reading of Dhal Asf depends upon an alternative written script named the Levantine Codex, Mushaf al-Sham. Contrary to what the Suyuti's words imply, Al-Khatib does not mention any reading in which either al-hab or dhu are genitive. So it could be Suyuti is drawing from some sources which mention that, but those sources, you know, were not picked up by Mu'jam al-Qira'at later on.
مضمر أي ويزوجون. فائدة قال
مفعول معه
بعضهم ليس في القرآن على كثرة منصوباته مفعول معه. قلت في القرآن عدة مواضع أعرب كل منها مفعولا معه، أحدها وهو أشهرها قوله تعالى فأجمعوا أمركم وشركاءكم، أي أجمعوا أنتم مع شركائكم أمركم، ذكره جماعة. الثاني قوله تعالى قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا، قال الكرماني في غرائب التفسير هو مفعول معه أي مع أهليكم. الثالث قوله تعالى لم يكن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب والمشركين، قال الكرماني يحتمل أن يكون قوله والمشركين مفعولا معه من الذين أو من الواو في كفروا.
Right, so that takes us to the end. One thing I'll mention just before we wrap up, Al-Kirmani stated in غرائب التفسير, so غرائب التفسير means tafsir hot takes, right? Tafsir hot takes or bad takes in tafsir. At the very least, unusual things. So there's a chapter later on in Al-Itqan which gathers these things. I'll see if I can just check for you the number of that chapter. It is chapter you see, I did a tweet about it. That's why I'm trying to find that tweet, which reminds me which chapter it is. Otherwise, I could do something sensible like look at the contents page. Right, it is chapter النوع التاسع والسبعون. Right, so it's almost at the end because there's 80 anwa'. So when he says that it is a commentative object, it's not necessarily that's Al-Kirmani's opinion, but rather it's something that he mentioned, right? And sometimes they mention things just so you know that someone said it. In fact, there's a quote from there's a quote there. So right at the beginning of chapter 79, al-Suyuti says, ألف فيه محمود بن حمزة الكرماني كتابا في مجلدين سماه العجائب والغرائب، ضمنه أقوالا ذكرت في معاني آيات منكرة لا يحل الاعتماد عليها ولا ذكرها إلا للتحذير منها. Right. So maybe following that rule, it would have to be said, unless what's happened is, and I'm not looking at Kirmani's work, he mentioned something else and then he said, no, actually it is maf'ul ma'hu. But there's nothing terrible about saying it maf'ul ma'hu, but I think the point is there's no need to resort to that when you have the atf is straightforward, right? And oh yeah, there's a really, really nice quote from Abu Muslim I wanted to share with you. So من ذلك قول من قال في حاميم عين سين قاف إن الحاء حرب علي ومعاوية والميم ولاية المروانية والعين ولاية العباسية والسين ولاية السفيانية والقاف قدرة مهدي. حكاه أبو مسلم al-Asfahani, who, as you know, I'm kind of a fan of. If you look at Flights and Flights paper about his opinion on Ibrahim and the birds. Anyway, حكاه أبو مسلم, he just quotes it, and then Abu Muslim says, ثم قال أردت بذلك أن يعلم أن في من يدعي العلم حمقى وما أردت من ذكري لبعض الأشياء غير ذلك. Okay, so we'll stop here, inshallah. Next up, chapter 42 on قواعد مهمة يحتاج المفسر إلى معرفتها. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.